Today would be lesson 6 in instructional videos for Master Kuo Lien Ying's Northern Shaolin form, Cha Chuan. And we'll learn 2 more moves in the beginning of section 2. Typically in a class situation, classical class situation like we had at Portsmouth Square, a student coming up through both the 10 roads of Tanhui and then starting to learn Cha Chuan would have typically older Kung Fu students, brothers or sisters, who are practicing the form, and they can look over and see the progression of the form as from where they had last learned, and they could see a few moves ahead of time. And of course, it was all on an honor system. You were not supposed to go to class and kind of look at what they were doing and then go home and try to practice anything that you hadn't been taught, just so that you would be practicing at the pace that your SIfu dictates for you. Here in this virtual world where I'm presenting the lessons in kind of online, again, there's sort of an honor system, but I trust that you just will be progressing as fast as you need to, and that's why I'm presenting these lessons in kind of a lesson by lesson, so that you can kind of go back and just work at your own pace. You don't need to keep up with the pace that we're going at on presenting them, because again, I'm presenting them just as I have time. Sometimes I have more time than others. Right now, we're just kind of busy at the ranch, so sometimes it's taking a little bit longer between how I like to do the lessons. But I also want to do a demonstration of the first section and complete second section, even though we're just kind of starting the second section, so that you can see where we would be within that section. And again, I'm arbitrarily breaking up the form into various sections so that you could just practice that section at a time. And also, as I'm teaching, I don't have to go back from, through all the moves in order to get to where we are. We could just start at the beginning of that section. And last lesson, we kind of began at the beginning of section 2, so we can just start right there. But I'm going to go ahead and do a presentation of the 2 different sections that we're working on, and I'll break it between section 1 and section 2. So this will be a demonstration of section 1 of Master Kuo Lien Ying's Northern Shaolin form, Cha Chuan. And this will be section 2 of the Cha Chuan form, starting from where we learned in the last lesson. So let's get right into the next 2 moves. This can be a fairly difficult move. It's a double jump kick, and it's also going to be a toe back on the double jump kick. And what that does is it kind of shortens your flexibility. So in order to get enough height for a smooth double jump kick, it kind of shortens it a little bit. And um, you're not doing any hand action. You're just staying in this left block and right fist position. So you don't have any momentum that you can create. Like if you learn the Tai Chi form, there's always a hand movement that you do with it. But in this particular case, your upper body is just pretty much static. And so you're doing the jump with just the leg strength and the forward movement. So I think one of the more difficult moves in the form, and this whole section actually is fairly difficult because as you saw in the last lesson, you're doing a high crescent and then dropping down on one leg into the drop stance, falling stance. And now you're going to come right back up and then do this double scissors kick with the toe back and then go into the bow and arrow stance from there. The two moves are connected, so it's a little bit harder to teach them separately because one move goes right from the double jump kick right into the bow and arrow stance. But I'll try to describe it as best as possible. So let's start off from where we were last time. So I'm going to include the last lesson in this review so that you can kind of get the momentum. So we started from this position in section 2, and we came up and then unlock and then the crescent kick here. And then we come into the blocking position with the fist underneath the shoulder here. So you're going to step forward, take a step, and then the left toe back kick, heel kick, will be on the left foot. And there's no way to do this slow. So as you do the kick, then you're going to kick with the right foot toe back, like that. So from this position here, I'm going to step forward and then step into the horse. Now the horse is straight on the line, 3 o'clock and 9 o'clock. So whereas you're on the diagonal line here, we're in the diagonal line. As soon as you do the 2 scissors kick, then you're going to turn back into the straight line. And from here, this hand drops down in front of the shoulder and the right punches out. I'll turn around so you can see better. This time I'll start with my back facing to you. So when I turn around, you'll be able to see the movements more clearly. As in the past videos, I like to point out how these movements in the second form, Cha Chuan, relate to the first form, the 10 roads of Tan Tui. If you've come up practicing Tan Tui, then these movements will be familiar to you. But if you're learning it kind of on the side, not having gone through Master Kuo's particular Tan Tui, then they'll be more foreign to you. In the 10th road, and also on the roads in the line road 5 to 8 and road 10, always start off with this stance, the bow and arrow stance, like this. And so when you turn around here, you go up, do the sweep, and you end up in this stance with the knees in stance here. And that's where this last punch comes from, that particular stance. Okay. To clarify, there's a lot of cross usage of names, and I need to address that at this point because I call this stance the bow and arrow stance because if you shoot Chinese archery and use a thumb ring, then that stance would be pretty familiar to you. That's what it looks like. On top of that, one day I was practicing the bow and arrow stance here, and then SIfu came up to me and he corrected my posture. He said, you need to make sure that the weight distribution is perfectly even when you're doing the stance, not one way to the other. And it's kind of interesting because Sifu grew up, in inner China, Mongolia, and the Mongolians are really a horse culture and archery culture. And when he was describing the necessity for keeping the stance even, he demonstrated that you control the horse as you're mounted on the horse, the direction of the horse with your knees. And of course, if you know anything about equestrian, that's true. You actually can signal and cue the horse by using your knee pressure left or right to control the horse. And if you ever watched them actually shooting Asian style thumb ring archery off a horse, they don't use the rein. They use the hands and the bow and arrow. And as they're riding, they shoot the bow and hit the mark by controlling the horse with the knees. And so that's a definite relationship of this, the name of this, to the bow and arrow stance. And so this stance is repeated both as I described in the 10 roads of Tantui, and then throughout the Cha Chuan form, it's repeated quite a few times. And in other styles of Kung Fu, people tend to call this stance the bow and arrow stance as well. And then in some styles, it's called the bow stance, B-O-W, not B-O. But because this is the bow, where your weight is here, and then this you're ready to shoot the leg through, and this is the arrow on this, what we call the bow and arrow stance. So usually in my presentations, I try to make a distinction. I don't usually call that stance the bow and arrow stance to differentiate it from this stance here. I call this the bow stance, and I call this the bow and arrow stance. Okay, that's just a little bit of a clarification. Also, in the 10th road of the Master Kuo's Tantui, it looks like this. From the turnaround into the bow and arrow stance. Then you come back into the drop stance. Blade hand strike, and then the scissors kick. Back to blade hand strike. So this next move coming out of that block where you're doing the scissors kick into the bow and arrow stance is pretty much right out of the 10th road of Tantui. So getting back to today's lesson, let's work on that double jump kick and then right into the bow and arrow stance. Again, I'm going to start with my back towards you because you get a better view of the hand and body movements. Just remember that we're going to be turned 180 degrees because normally you would be from this position here and then going back and working in this direction. So if I start from this direction here, then so we can start right from this position here. So I know that this double jump kick is kind of going to be difficult. So my suggestion, again, in the learning sequence, just remembering the sequence of the movements and the positioning of the end is just as important as the actual movement itself. Again, in the difficulty, sometimes it's just difficult physically to do. And in this case, I think that that's the case for this. Other times it's difficult to remember the sequence or the little nuances of the ending position, beginning position. I don't think that that's a problem here. I think it's just the difficulty of doing that double jump kick. And so if you have difficulty doing even like a medium height jump or even a low jump, you can kind of lower the kick a little bit so that you can do it a little bit easier. Also, on any type of scissors kick, you have to remember that as soon as you do the second kick, the kick that is raised will automatically come down. So there's what is called a float period. If you can kick high, you have a greater float period because as you kind of lift up, then you wait a little bit and then do the second kick. So it's a little bit of a like that. But if you can't kick high, then right here you don't have as much float, so you have to go like that. But remember not to start the second kick too soon, because if I go like that, that other foot, the first kick, will automatically come down and you shorten the stride and the height. So that's one of the keys. Unlike a snap kick where you can kind of jump up and do that, when you do a straight leg kick, it's much harder to do that little jump. But if you go back and look at a video where I did modifying the scissors kick, you'll see some pointers, and that might be able to apply it to this lesson as well. And again, as I said in the beginning of the lesson, that having the toe back makes it even much more difficult than a regular pointed toe scissors kick. So a couple options that you can do just to learn this movement is you can do a pointed toe kick, which would be easier to learn. And then once you get the feeling of the kick, then you can start to work on getting the toe back. Other modification is do kind of a lower kick. So again, because you're not doing anything with your hands, if you just do kind of a low kick like that, and then step into the horse. So when you step into the horse, your hands will be basically in this position. We're in a circle and then shoot out with the right fist. Again, in this bow and arrow stance, the back hand is facing out. Normally on like a thumb ring, it's more horizontal, but this one is turned with the back of the fist towards you. Front of your shoulder, level, in tight, and in line with the fist, the vertical fist out here. And then knees in, sitting down like you're riding a horse. That. Okay, again from the second kicking position, here you step out into the horse, and then you're in this position here, circle and punch. Okay. As soon as you land and step into the horse is when you're going to do the bow and arrow punch like that. So again, from as soon as you do this kick here, then you do the punch. The movements in the second section tend to be more flowing, so we need to work on the kind of the rhythm of the movements. So we start always from the beginning of the second section while we're working on the second section, so you can kind of see the rhythm of the sequences. So again, I'll start with my back facing you so that you can kind of see a better view here. So in the first few moves, there is slight pause as you do this. High, drop down. From here, pop back up. And as soon as you pop back up, you're going to step right into the scissors kick and then into the bow and arrow. Again, there's no pause after the scissors kick right into the bow and arrow. And typically when you're coming off the kick down, then you can pop right back up. It's a good idea when you're doing these drop stances to be able to come right out of it back up, because as I pointed out in other videos, the kind of bounce from the drop stance up is part of the strength of that stance. You don't want to stay down there too long and get stuck in a low position where you can be attacked on the ground like that. But in practicing both to increase your flexibility, then it's okay to hold it down here and then come up here. Now after this, you can hold this for a split second like a block and then run right into the double jump kick and then the bow and arrow punch. Okay, so we'll do it one more time with my back to you and then we'll face the right direction. Okay, here. This time I'll start facing the camera as in the correct direction that it should be facing. And then you can see the view from the backside as I'm doing it. So remember, it comes from the run, here. Then overhand, turn, press and kick, block. So we're in the lesson there. I hope you're enjoying these videos, learning the Cha Chuan. It's a really beautiful form and it has a lot of flow to it. And flow and dynamic movement are kind of the keys. Again, as I emphasize, all the movements should be nice and relaxed and the power should come from kind of the expansion and the root. Don't try to do it like stiff and rigid, okay? So that's the key. So again, as in other videos, if you have any questions, leave them in the comment section and I'll be sure to address them. Thank you. This is a little addendum footnote on gaining a little bit more loose explosive power in the Northern Shaolin. In earlier lesson, we learned that from the high kick, to step across and to pull back with the left created more torque for that punch. In the same way, in the Tanhui form, a lot of the punching has kind of a dynamic, both like I described it like snapping a chalk line. When you snap it, there's a certain power that flows out through the line. So in the Tanhui, many of the movements, you have both arms expanding out like snapping a chalk line. In the same way, in the bow and arrow stance that we're learning today, the movement from here, typically on the bow and arrow, it comes up, it's like snapping back as the elbow comes back and the punch goes out. On this one here, you're like from here, you're coming back with the elbow straight out. It's kind of like that snapping of the chalk line. So this is a concept that runs through the Northern Shaolin, kind of using the opposite extremity to add force for the outgoing extremity. This is kind of an example of it.